I want to begin this series on spiritual warfare with a single question. Has a snake ever slithered up to you and talked you into doing something? Yeah, me neither. And other than the account of Balaam, where we are told God opens the mouth of the donkey, which implies it being a miraculous one-off occurrence, there are no other literal talking animals in Scripture. So what actually happened in the Garden of Eden? Let's begin our search by looking at the Hebrew word for serpent, which is Strong's 5175, Nakash, and the same three letters, Nun, Ket, Shin, also form Strong's 5174, meaning copper or bronze, 5173, meaning divination or enchantment, and 5172, meaning to practice divination. So what is divination? Well, according to Strong's exhaustive concordance, it means to hiss or whisper a spell, but also to learn by experience, which is interesting. Now, after Eve and Adam have sinned, God shows up and Adam blames Eve and Eve blames the serpent. And God tells of the consequences, beginning with the serpent, who is cursed to go on his belly and eat dust all the days of his life. And oddly enough, these same elements show up in the law of jealousy in Numbers 5, which documents the process a man is to take if he suspects his wife of adultery but can't prove it. In this instance, he brings his wife before the priest along with the prescribed offering, and the priest then makes the bitter water that causes the curse by sprinkling dust from the tabernacle floor into holy water. And before drinking this water, the woman takes an oath that if she has been unfaithful, the water will cause her thigh to rot and her belly to swell. But if she has not, then she is free from the curse. So this is also an interesting parallel, to say the least. But let's move on to the word Satan or Satan. This word means adversary, and it also says that it is the name of the superhuman adversary of God, and it is translated as such 18 times. But if we look at the occurrences of this word, we can see that 17 of them have the article ha in front, which is Hebrew for deep. So this eliminates those from being proper nouns. To prove this, let's look at the name David. Of the more than 1,000 times David is mentioned in Scripture, there are no occurrences that have ha in front because David is actually a proper noun. Next, we have Lusatan. La means two. So in these cases, Satan is being used as a verb, like someone is opposing or Sataning, as we might say, somebody else. And we can see this in Numbers 22, which has the first two uses of the word. This is when Balaam went with Balak's men after God told him not to. And the angel of Yeshua stood in the way with his sword drawn, Sataning Balaam to kill him. So the very first Satan of Scripture is the angel of Yeshua, which could be quite problematic, but it gets worse. In the next use, where it is just Satan, we see it is mostly translated as an adversary. And in these cases, it is talking about Hadad the Edomite and Rezon, son of Eliada, who God raised up against Solomon when he married all those foreign women, contrary to the commandment. But in 1 Chronicles, when David numbers Israel, it is Satan who provokes him to do it. And as a result, Yahuwah sends a pestilence which kills 70,000 men. Now, if we go to this exact same story in 2 Samuel, it says, and again the anger of Yahuwah was kindled against Israel, and he moved David against them to say, go number Israel and Judah. So Yahuwah sent a pestilence upon Israel from the morning even to the time appointed, and there died of the people from Dan even to Beersheba 70,000 men. Now, we are not told why God had a bone to pick with Israel, but knowing God and considering the nature of the judgment and knowing Israel, if I was forced to make a bet, I'd put my money on it being related to idolatry. But whatever the case, we can be sure that this is a parallel account, which means that Yahuwah himself is Satan based on this interpretation. But let's dig deeper. The final form, was Satan, meaning and Satan, is in Psalm 109, where David petitions God concerning his enemies. So let's look at his complaint. Hold not thy peace, O God of my praise, for the mouth of the wicked and the mouth of the deceitful are opened against me. They have spoken against me with a lying tongue. They compassed me about also with words of hatred and fought against me without a cause. For my love they are my adversaries, but I give myself unto prayer. And they have rewarded me evil for good, and hatred for my love. Set thou a wicked man over him, and let Satan stand at his right hand. So this is starting to paint a different picture of who Satan is or what it means. Next, let's look at Yeshua's temptation. The first thing to note is he was led into the wilderness by the Spirit. Then he was tempted by the devil, which means slanderer, to turn stones to bread, to jump off the pinnacle of the temple, and finally to worship the devil in exchange for all the kingdoms of the world. Now, I will be diving into the temptations themselves in the next study. But here, I want to focus on Yeshua's response to this particular temptation because it elicits a very strong rebuke of "Get thee behind me, Satan." Now, it would seem pretty stupid for a fallen angel to even suggest this to Yeshua. But this is the one which provokes the strongest response before the devil departs for a season or until an opportune time. And that opportune time comes in his darkest hour when it's time to go to the cross. As he tells his disciples what they don't want to hear, the devil shows up again, but this time through Peter. And he gets the same sharp response, "Get thee behind me, Satan." But this time he adds, "Thou art an offense unto me, for thou savorest not the things that be of God, but those that be of men." So Yeshua leaves no wiggle room for the identity of Satan. It is the man whose desire opposes the will of God. And this is why Yeshua could tell the Pharisees and scribes, who were the teachers of Israel, that their father is the devil, a liar and the father of it, because they were fulfilling the lust of their own mind and rejecting the truth that they knew he was teaching, and thereby opposing the will of God for their own self-serving purposes. So the devil that tempted Yeshua in the wilderness was his own mind. And that suggestion to worship the devil was just a suggestion to do his own thing and take the kingdom before the appointed time. And while it wasn't the right time for that temptation in the wilderness, there is no better time than the present. The people had already heralded him as king, yelling, "Hosanna, Hosanna." Everybody knew who he was. And Judas had already set affairs in order for him to show his great strength and power against the opposition. And of course he knew how to take the kingdom. You know he knew. So why wait? Why go to the cross? Skip the suffering servant part and go straight to the conquering king. Do it your own way. This is why Yeshua prays in the garden, "Not my will, but thy will be done." Because yes, as a man, he was tempted to go against the will of God. And the word offense that he used when he said, "Thou art an offense to me," is scandalon or scandal, meaning a stumbling block or trap. Because the only thing worse than warring in yourself against something that you want to do that God has told you not to do is warring with your closest companion who is also encouraging you to do it. And now we can understand why the kingdom destroyed by the stone in Daniel 2 is the statue of a man. That man is Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. And all the kingdoms of the world that Yeshua was shown were a part of that kingdom, which began with Babylon and ended with Israel, as I show in Revelation 13. But that kingdom was not the kingdom he was to inherit. That kingdom was temporal, but his is eternal. And the forfeiture of the eternal for the temporal is never a good trade. Yeshua's kingdom was about to be established at the fall of Babylon, which brings me to Lucifer of Isaiah 14, which says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High." The mount of the congregation is Mount Moriah, where the temple stood, and the stars of God are Israel, as can be demonstrated from Joseph's dream. Lucifer is a Latin translation of the Hebrew word halal, meaning shining one or son of the dawn. These references are understood to be talking about Venus, the brightest object in the heavens behind the sun and the moon, with its majesty being displayed just before the sun rises and eclipses it, which sheds even more light on when the worst temptations show up. In Daniel 2, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream where he sees an image whose brightness was excellent, having a head of gold, followed by inferior metals, and finally mixed with clay. So this image represents man in all his glory. In the interpretation, Nebuchadnezzar is called the King of Kings, one of the titles of Mashiach, and identified with the head of gold, the metal employed in the most holy things. Since the brain is in the head, all of the other kingdoms in this image will have a similar frame of mind to Nebuchadnezzar, yet without his honor. Nebuchadnezzar exalts himself to the place of God, specifically by seeking to replace God as king of Israel. But Venus, for all its brightness, never rises high in the sky, and neither will Nebuchadnezzar, as he is cast down while fawning over himself at the height of his kingdom. In Luke 10, Yeshua said he saw Satan fall like lightning after the disciples come back from preaching the truth of the kingdom and brag about casting out demons. Now, I take this to mean that Yeshua could see what was happening the same way he saw Nathanael under the fig tree, but it's also interesting that he may have been speaking scientifically here. A 2015 study out of NYU found that calcium ion spikes in the brain appear as lightning bolts on screen when learning new information. As far as casting out demons, let's go to Luke chapter 11. In verse 15, after Yeshua heals a mute, they accuse him of casting out demons by Beelzebub, the chief of demons. So who is Beelzebub? Beelzebub was the idol of Ekron, who Ahaziah, king of Israel, sent to when he was sick before God sent Elijah to interject with a response. So Beelzebub is an idol, and the chief demon, which means demons, are idols, which are physical statues that represent deities, as the Greek confirms. And if Yeshua was casting them out, this means that they were present in the land. And because they were present in the land, God's protection was taken away. And we see things like mutes and lunatics. Even in the false accusation of Yeshua, it was related to mania, all of which are what we now call mental illnesses, just like the one Saul had when God took his spirit from him and sent an evil spirit to torment him, and just like we see with Nebuchadnezzar. This is particularly revealed in the case of the boy who was casting himself into the fire, which was the means by which Israel worshipped Molech, and the man named Legion, for he was many, i.e. schizophrenic, with the unclean spirit, who before Yeshua restored to his right mind, was said to dwell in the tombs, and whose healing occurred near a herd of swine. Now swine is unclean meat, which is not to be eaten by Israel. So what would be the purpose of hurting them? In Isaiah 65 verse 2, Yahuwah says, I have spread out my hands all the day unto a rebellious people, which walketh in a way that was not good, after their own thoughts. A people that provoketh me to anger continually to my face, that sacrificeth in gardens, and burneth incense upon altars of brick, which remain among the graves, and lodge in the monuments, which eat swine's flesh, and broth of abominable things is in their vessels. So this unclean spirit is linked to eating unclean meats, which goes to show that when you go against God, even your own mind turns on you. I didn't deal with the Satan of Job or Joshua in Zechariah 3, but rest assured I will be exploring them in the next study. So what actually happened in the garden? The same thing that happened to you every time you did something you wasn't supposed to do. After first slandering God in her mind by assuming he was withholding something beneficial from her, Eve thought to herself that it would be a good idea to take the fruit that did not belong to her, which is covetousness. She took it, which is theft, and ate it, which was a violation of the dietary law, all of her own free will. No talking snakes with legs or fallen angels involved. And although Adam was with her, he didn't stop her because he was not a mind reader. Now after the fall, but before she conceived Cain and Abel, Adam names her Eve, or Kawa, meaning life, because she is mother of all the living. So what had Eve given life to at this point? The Nakash, who whispered this bright idea to her, and whose curse she also bears in the test of unfaithfulness, as we have already seen. So she is now, for all intents and purposes, the mother of both man and beast, since she hearkened to her inner serpent and became like a beast of the field. This whole episode is a testimony of how everything begins with a thought, and every thought either declares God's will or a different will. There are many ways to oppose God, but only one way to agree with him. And you get to choose your path and decide whether you will be a servant of God or if you will be Satan, his adversary. So the moral of the story is covetousness leads to death. Thus resist the devil and he will flee from you.